Emily Sinclair stood on the balcony of her father's five-star hotel, 30 floors above Manhattan, contemplating how easy it would be to simply step off. Not that she would, but the thought crossed her mind more often than she cared to admit. The Sinclair name was plastered across 12 luxury hotels worldwide, and as the only child of hospitality mogul Richard Sinclair, Emily's life was mapped out in meticulous detail. Every outfit, every statement, every social media post, all carefully curated to uphold the Sinclair brand of flawless elegance. "Miss Sinclair," her assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. "Your father wants you in the kitchen. There's an incident." Emily sighed, smoothing her immaculate Chanel suit. An incident meant something was threatening her father's perfect world, which meant she'd be tasked with making it disappear. She took the private elevator down to the hotel's renowned kitchen, the heart of Celestial, their Michelin-starred restaurant. The moment the elevator doors slid open, chaos assaulted her senses. Smoke billowed from a flaming pan, staff scrambled with extinguishers, and in the center of it all stood a man she'd never seen before, tall, with wild dark curls and a sauce-splattered apron, frantically waving a towel at the fire alarm. "Turn that damn thing off before it triggers the sprinklers," Richard Sinclair bellowed, his face purpling. Too late. With a mechanical hiss, water rained down from the ceiling, drenching everything: the pristine workstations, the staff, Emily's perfect silk blouse, and her father's custom suit. "I swear I didn't mean to," the curly-haired man started, but Richard cut him off. "You're fired. Get out of my hotel." The man's shoulders slumped, but something in his green eyes flashed. Not fear, but frustration. "Sir, with all due respect, that sauce was revolutionary before it revolutionized your fire system." Emily couldn't help it. A snort of laughter escaped her lip. Her father turned, noticing her for the first time. "Emily, deal with this walking catastrophe. Make sure he never works in hospitality again." As Richard stormed off, leaving puddles in his wake, Emily approached the disaster chef. Water dripped from his eyelashes, and a smudge of what appeared to be truffle paste decorated his cheek. "So," she said, crossing her arms, "you've managed to set fire to a kitchen that survived 3 decades without incident, flood $1 million renovation, and enrage the most powerful man in luxury hospitality. Impressive morning's work." The chef ran a hand through his soaked curls, making them stand up wildly. "I'm Jake Collins, and that sauce was going to change lives before it, changed your sprinkler system, Emily Sinclair, and I'm supposed to ensure you never cook professionally again." Jake's eyes widened. "Wait, the Emily Sinclair, the ice princess of hospitality." Emily's spine stiffened. She'd heard the nickname before, of course, whispered behind hands at galas and industry events. The perfectly groomed heiress who never put a foot wrong, never showed emotion, never made mistakes. "I prefer Miss Sinclair," she said coldly. "Right." Jake shook his head, water droplets flying. "Well, Miss Sinclair, before you destroy my career, can I at least explain what happened?" Something about his earnestness gave her pause. "You have 2 minutes. My Louboutins are ruined, and I'm not feeling particularly charitable." Jake's face lit up with passion as he launched into a rapid-fire explanation about molecular gastronomy, flavor compounds, and how he'd been attempting to create a temperature-reactive sauce that would transform on the plate. It was working beautifully until something, maybe the truffle oil, reacted differently than expected. But I was onto something revolutionary. Despite herself, Emily was intrigued, not by the science, but by Jake himself, this chaotic whirlwind who had somehow slipped through her father's rigorous hiring process. "And how exactly did you get hired here?" "My father only employs chefs with spotless reputations and classical training." "Jake, looked sheepish. Well, your executive chef, Marco, was impressed with a pop-up dinner I ran in Brooklyn. He, might have glossed over some details of my background when recommending me. Details like how I've been kicked out of 3 kitchens for experimental approaches, and maybe the incident with the liquid nitrogen at Jean-Georges. Jake shrugged. I call it innovation. Others call it property damage. A small smile tugged at Emily's lips before she could suppress it. Most people would be begging for their job right now. I'm not most people. And honestly, I knew this job wasn't going to work out the moment I saw your kitchen's rulebook. 78 pages. Who needs 78 pages to say cook good food? Emily had personally written that rulebook. Every protocol, every standard, every minute detail of kitchen operations designed to ensure perfection. Now this sauce-splattered disaster was criticizing her life's work. Yet instead of anger, she felt a flicker of something. Curiosity, amusement. Tell you what, Jake Collins, I won't blacklist you from every kitchen in New York. Relief flooded his face. Thank you. That's... If, she interrupted, you show me what was so special about this sauce, that it was worth flooding a 5-star hotel kitchen. Jake's grin could have powered the city. Deal, but not here. My apartment. Tonight, 7 o'clock. He scribbled an address on a soggy ticket order and handed it to her. Emily stared at him, stunned by his audacity. You're asking me on a date after causing thousands in water damage? Not a date, a culinary experience, unless you're afraid to step outside your perfect Sinclair bubble. That did it. Nobody challenged Emily Sinclair. Fine, 7 o'clock. But if this is a waste of my time, I'll personally call every restaurant in the country. As she clicked away on her ruined heels, Emily felt something unfamiliar, a flutter of anticipation. For the first time in years, her evening wasn't populated by a color-coded calendar entry. For once, she was stepping into the unknown, and it terrified her. Jake's apartment turned out to be the floor above a tiny Vietnamese restaurant in Chinatown, accessed through a narrow staircase lined with potted herbs. Emily stood on the grimy sidewalk, questioning her sanity. Her driver had looked positively alarmed when she'd instructed him to drop her at this address. Taking a deep breath, she climbed the stairs and knocked. Jake opened the door with flour dusting his cheeks, wearing a faded t-shirt that read "Whisk Taker." The small apartment was essentially one large kitchen with a bed shoved in the corner, every surface covered with jars of mysterious ingredients, well-worn cookbooks, and equipment Emily didn't recognize. You came. He sounded genuinely surprised. I said I would. Emily remained in the doorway, suddenly uncertain. This was madness. She didn't visit strange men's apartments. She didn't deviate from her schedule. She definitely didn't stand in flour-dusted kitchens in her Dior dress. Come in, don't mind the mess. Or, well, maybe mind it a little. Watch that stack of Too Late. Emily's designer bag knocked over a tower of vintage cookbooks, sending them cascading to the floor. Jake lunged to catch them, colliding with a hanging copper pot, which swung dangerously before crashing into a row of spice jars. In seconds, the kitchen looked like a culinary crime scene, with paprika dusting everything in a fine orange powder. I'm so sorry, Emily gasped, mortified. But Jake was laughing. Welcome to my world. First rule of Jake's kitchen: chaos is just creativity finding its level. Emily couldn't remember the last time someone had laughed in her presence without restraint. At Sinclair hotels, mishaps were met with terse apologies and swift corrections, never laughter. I should go, she said stiffly, but Jake was already guiding her to a bar stool at his kitchen island. Nope, you're here for the sauce. Remember? Besides, you're already covered in paprika. Might as well get the full experience. He handed her a glass of wine from an unlabeled bottle. My friend's vineyard, totally experimental, might be brilliant, might be vinegar. The wine was exceptional. Of course, as was the cuisine, Jake proceeded to create a whirlwind demonstration of techniques Emily had never seen. Flavors that shouldn't work together somehow, harmonizing perfectly. And yes, the infamous sauce, recreated safely this time, that transformed from solid to liquid when it hit the warmth of the dish. This is extraordinary, Emily admitted, watching the sauce melt into a vibrant pool. How did you learn to cook like this? Jake shrugged, leaning against the counter. My mom ran a diner in Ohio. Nothing fancy, but she let me experiment in the kitchen after hours. I'd mix the weirdest ingredients, trying to surprise her. His expression softened. She died when I was 16. Cooking became my way of keeping her with me. Emily felt a pang. Her own mother had left when she was 8. Unable to handle Richard Sinclair's obsession with perfection, Emily had been raised by a series of nannies and boarding schools, each reinforcing the message, Sinclairs do not fit. My father would hate this kitchen, she said, looking around at the creative chaos. Actually, he'd hate everything about you. Jake grinned. I'll take that as a compliment. You should. Emily surprised herself with her honesty. His approval comes at a cost I'm not sure is worth paying anymore. The words hung in the air between them, more revealing than she'd intended. Jake studied her with those keen green eyes, seeing past her perfect exterior to something she usually kept hidden. What would Emily Sinclair do if she wasn't being a Sinclair? He asked softly. No one had ever asked her that before. I don't know, she whispered. I've never had the luxury of finding out. Jake stepped closer, paprika still dusting his dark curls. Maybe it's time you did. For one breathless moment, Emily thought he might kiss her. Part of her, a wild, unfamiliar part, wanted him to. Instead, he placed a small dish in front of her. Dessert, apple pie reimagined. What looked like a perfect miniature glass apple sat on the plate. When Emily's spoon touched it, the shell shattered, revealing warm apple filling inside. The shell is sugar glass with apple essence. The filling is a molecular interpretation of my mom's pie recipe. Jake's voice held a note of vulnerability. It's like life, you know. Sometimes you have to break something beautiful to find something even better inside. Emily looked up at him, something shifting inside her. In the span of one evening, this disaster of a chef had shown her more honesty, more passion, and more life than she'd experienced in years of 5-star luxury. Why are you looking at me like that? Jake asked. Like what? Like I'm a puzzle you're trying to solve. Emily smiled, a real smile, not the practiced one she used at hotel functions. Because you are a very messy puzzle. Jake laughed, the sound warming the small kitchen. Takes one to know one. Ice Princess. For once the nickname didn't stick. The next morning, Richard Sinclair was apoplectic. You did what? He thundered, pacing his penthouse office. Emily sat calmly, her posture perfect as always, but something had changed in her eyes. I hired Jake Collins as our new innovation chef. He'll have his own test kitchen separate from Celestial's main operations. The man is a walking disaster. He nearly burned down our flagship kitchen. He's a genius, Dad. His techniques could revolutionize our culinary program. The Matsuhisa group already approached him after they heard about the incident. That got Richard's attention. Nobu Matsuhisa was his biggest rival. How do you know that? Because I've spent the last week researching Jake's background. Those incidents at other restaurants, they all led to award-winning dishes after he left. The chefs took his ideas and claimed them as their own. This was partially true. Emily had indeed researched Jake thoroughly, but she'd also spent 6 evenings in his chaotic kitchen, watching him work, talking until dawn, and slowly feeling the ice around her heart begin to thaw. Richard narrowed his eyes. This isn't like you, Emily. You don't take risks. Maybe it's time I did. She slid a proposal across his desk. a new concept within Celestial, the lab, where diners can watch Jake create experimental dishes, limited seating, higher price point, exclusive experience. Richard scanned the document, his expression shifting from outrage to calculation. The profit margins would be exceptional if it worked. When it works, Emily corrected, I'll oversee it personally. Fine, Richard finally conceded. But the first sign of trouble, he's gone. And Emily, don't make me regret trusting your judgment. As she left her father's office, Emily allowed herself a small smile of triumph. Phase 1 complete. Now for the hard part. Telling Jake he was working for the Sinclairs again. Jake's reaction was exactly as explosive as she'd expected. Absolutely not. He paced his tiny kitchen, waving a wooden spoon for emphasis. Your father literally said he'd destroy my career. And now he's giving you your own kitchen, Emily countered. Complete creative control. Until I make one mistake and he fires me again. He won't fire you. I won't let him. Jake stopped pacing, studying her face. Why are you doing this, Emily? A week ago you were ready to blacklist me yourself. Emily couldn't tell him the whole truth, that for the first time in her life, she'd met someone who made her feel alive, that his chaotic approach to cooking had somehow awakened something in her that had been dormant for decades. Because your food deserves to be experienced, she said instead, and because I think the Sinclair brand needs to evolve. We've been playing it safe for too long. Jake ran a hand through his unruly hair. There will be conditions. I work my way. No 78-page rule books. Agreed. And you have dinner with me every night after service. Emily blinked. That's not a professional condition. Jake stepped closer, his green eyes intent. I'm not a professional kind of guy. In case you hadn't noticed. Say yes, Emily. Her heart raced as she nodded. Yes. Great. He grinned. Then I accept the job. God help us both. The lab opened 3 months later to immediate acclaim. Food critics raved about the controlled chaos of watching Jake Collins create dishes that defied culinary logic. Reservations were booked 6 months out. Richard Sinclair, seeing the profits roll in, reluctantly admitted Emily's gamble had paid off. What Richard didn't know was how those nightly dinners had evolved. How Jake had slowly but surely been dismantling Emily's carefully constructed walls. How he'd taken her to hole-in-the-wall restaurants where they ate with their hands. How he'd taught her to embrace imperfection, to laugh when things went wrong, to find beauty in the unexpected. And Emily, in turn, had brought order to Jake's chaos, helping him channel his wild creativity into a sustainable business model, teaching him the art of delegation, showing him that some rules actually enhanced freedom rather than restricting it. They were fire and ice, chaos and order, somehow balancing each other perfectly, until the night everything threatened to collapse. It started with a special guest at the lab, world-famous chef and notorious perfectionist, Alan Job. Emily knew Jake idolized the man, despite their opposite approaches to cooking. What she didn't know was that Alan had once fired Jake from a prestigious position in Paris, calling him a menace to the culinary arts. Watching from the dining room, Emily saw the moment Jake recognized Alan, saw his hands falter as he plated a delicate dessert. For the first time since opening, Jake Collins looked frightened. The dessert he sent out was technically perfect, but lacked his usual flair. Alan tasted it, nodded curtly, and requested to meet the chef. In the kitchen, Alan spoke quietly to Jake. Emily couldn't hear what was said, but Jake's face darkened. When Alan left, Jake disappeared into the walk-in refrigerator. Emily followed, finding him sitting on an upturned milk crate, head in his hands. Jake, what happened? He offered me a job, executive chef at his new restaurant in Singapore. Emily felt like the floor had dropped out from under her. Are you going to take it? Jake looked up, his expression unreadable. He said, it's time I stopped playing around in this novelty experiment and returned to serious cooking. The words cut through Emily like a knife. Is that what this is to you? A novelty experiment? His words, not mine. But you didn't correct him. Emily's voice hardened. After everything we've built here, She stopped herself. They had never put a name to what was happening between them. Jake stood, frustration evident. This is exactly why I don't belong in the Sinclair world. Everything has to be perfect. Labeled, categorized. That's not fair, isn't it? You've been trying to fix me since day one, Emily. Make me fit into your perfect world. That's not true. Tears threatened, but Emily Sinclair didn't cry, not even now. I believed in your vision when no one else did. As a business opportunity, Jake said bitterly. The perfect Emily Sinclair, always calculating the angles. The unfairness of it stole her breath. If that's what you think of me, then maybe you should take the job. She turned and walked out, spine rigid, eyes forged, channeling every lesson in composure she'd ever learned. Only when she reached her apartment did she allow herself to crumple, the tears finally coming. Jake didn't show up for work the next day or the next. Emily ran the lab in his absence, following his recipes exactly. But critics immediately noticed the difference. The magic is gone, one wrote. After a week, Richard summoned her. Collins is finished. We'll replace him. No, Emily's voice was quiet, but firm. The lab was built around Jake's vision, a vision he abandoned. Cut your losses, Emily. This is business. But it wasn't just business. Not anymore. Somehow, the disaster chef had become essential, not just to the lab, but to Emily herself. I need to find him, she said. Richard's expression softened unexpectedly. You care for him. It wasn't a question. Emily nodded, unable to speak past the tightness in her throat. Then what are you doing in my office? Jake's apartment was dark when Emily arrived. The herbs on the staircase had wilted from neglect. She knocked, but no one answered. Using the key he'd given her for emergencies, defined by Jake as if you ever crave my special pancakes at 3 a.m., she entered. The apartment was unnaturally tidy, with boxes stacked by the door. Jake sat at his kitchen island, staring at a plane ticket. Singapore? Emily asked quietly. Jake looked up, surprised. Emily. She moved further into the apartment, noticing how strange it looked without the usual creative chaos. You're really leaving? I thought that's what you wanted. I never wanted you to leave. The words caught in her throat. I wanted you to stay, to choose me, choose us, over some famous chef's validation. Jake set down the ticket. I was scared, okay? Aline Dubois told me I wasn't good enough years ago, and I've been running from that judgment ever since. Then I look at you, perfect in every way, and I think, how long until she realizes I'm not good enough either? Not good enough. Emily laughed incredulously. Jake, you're the most alive person I've ever met. You taught me that perfection is overrated, that beauty comes from taking risks. And you, Jake said, standing, taught me that some things are worth doing right, worth protecting. He moved closer. I turned down the job. I was sitting here trying to figure out how to apologize, how to tell you that Emily didn't let him finish. She closed the distance between them, pulling him down into a kiss that expressed everything words could. When they finally broke apart, Jake rested his forehead against hers. What about your father? The Sinclair empire? Emily smiled. Dad will adapt. And if not, maybe it's time for a Collins Sinclair venture, something that combines your chaos and my order. Jake laughed, the sound filling the apartment with warmth. I love you, Emily Sinclair. God help me, but I do. I love you too, Jake Collins. She looked around at the boxes. Now unpack. We have a restaurant to run. Yes, ma'am. He saluted playfully, then pulled her close again. But first, I think we should thoroughly mess up this suspiciously tidy apartment. Emily grinned, feeling freer than she had in her entire life. But, she said, pulling him toward the bed, sounds like a perfect plan. 1 year later, Sinclair and Collins opened its doors, not in a luxury hotel, but in a converted warehouse in Brooklyn. The restaurant embodied its owner's partnership. Jake's wildly inventive cuisine, presented with Emily's meticulous attention to detail. Richard Sinclair, after initial resistance, became their biggest investor, admitting privately to Emily that Jake had a certain undisciplined genius he'd grown to respect. As for Emily and Jake, they found their balance. She embraced a little more chaos. He accepted a bit more structure, and together they created something neither could have achieved alone. On opening night, as their staff bustled around them, Jake pulled Emily into the walk-in refrigerator for a moment of quiet. "Remember our first kitchen disaster?" he asked, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Emily smiled. "How could I forget? You nearly burned down a 5-star hotel. Best mistake I ever made." Jake pressed a small velvet box into her hand. "Want to make another one with me? This one permanent?" Inside was a ring, not a traditional diamond, but a swirl of platinum that looked like a sauce being poured over a perfectly set stone. "Chaos meets order," Jake explained. "What do you say, Ice Princess? Ready to be a disaster with me forever?" Emily Sinclair, who once calculated every move, controlled every outcome, and lived by a 78-page rulebook, didn't hesitate. "Absolutely yes, because sometimes the most perfect thing in life is finding someone who embraces your imperfections. And sometimes a 5-alarm kitchen fire is just the beginning of the greatest love story ever told." OMG, did you fall in love with Emily and Jake too? Drop a comment telling us your most disastrous cooking moment. Rate this chaotic love story 110 and smash that like button. Want more heart-melting romances with a side of disaster? Subscribe now and hit that notification bell. New stories every week that'll make you laugh, cry, and believe in love again.